People all over this country understand we are a nation today that faces enormous crises. Sadly, the continuing resolution passed Tuesday in the U.S. House, and which will come to this body very shortly, not only does nothing to address these crises, but in fact, it makes a bad situation much worse. Today, at a time when we have more income and wealth inequality than we have ever had in the history of this country, 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. And what that means, Mr. President, I grew up in a family living paycheck to paycheck. It means that people are worried about how they're going to afford housing. What happens if their landlord raises the rent? People go to the grocery store and they see the high price of food and wonder how they're going to feed their kids. People are looking at the outrageous cost of childcare, but you need childcare if you're going to go to work. How can you afford childcare? Our health care system is dysfunctional. People worry about how they can afford health care if they are lucky enough to be able to find a doctor. That is the reality of what's going on in our country today. Rich are getting richer, working people are struggling, and 800,000 Americans are sleeping out in the streets. So given that reality, what does this bill do? The bill written by the right-wing extremists in the House of Representatives without any bipartisan discussion at all. What does this bill do? Well, let me count the ways that it makes the financial struggles of working people even more difficult than they are today. And it does all of that, Mr. President, to lay the groundwork for massive tax breaks for Elon Musk and the billionaire class. For a start, some 22% of our seniors in this country are trying to survive on $15,000 a year or less, which to me is really quite incredible. I don't know how anybody, let alone a senior, survives on $15,000 a year or less. Half of our seniors are trying to survive on $30,000 a year or less. So what does the Trump-Musk administration do to address the terrible economic pressures on seniors all over America? Well, they got a brilliant idea. They illegally fire thousands of workers at the Social Security Administration with plans to cut that staff in half. Mr. President, in America today, 30,000 people die each year waiting to receive their Social Security disability benefits because of a grossly understaffed and under-resourced Social Security Administration. My office, and I expect your office, and I expect every other office, gets calls every day from seniors saying, I'm having a problem with Social Security. I can't make contact with the Social Security people. They're not getting back to me. And that is because today they are understaffed. If Musk and Trump get their way and the Social Security Administration staff is cut in half, nobody can deny that that is a death sentence for many thousands of seniors who desperately need their benefits. Now, Mr. Musk, who's worth a few $100 billion, may not understand that there are millions of seniors in this country who have nothing in the bank, worry every day how they're going to heat their homes or buy the food that they need. And if they can't get the benefits that they need, some of them will in fact die. And let me be clear, when you have Mr. Musk calling Social Security a Ponzi scheme, despite the fact that it has paid out every benefit owed to every eligible American for the last 80-plus years. That ain't no Ponzi scheme. When you have the President of the United States coming before Congress and lying, outrageously lying, about millions of people who are 150 or 200 years of age receiving Social Security benefits, a total lie. Everybody should understand what's going on. Trump and Musk are laying the groundwork for dismantling the most successful federal program in history, Social Security, a program that keeps over 27 million Americans out of poverty. And by the way, just to set the record straight, over 99% of the more than 70 million Social Security checks that go out each month are going to people who earned those benefits. Over 99%. People 150 or 500 years of age are not getting Social Security checks. But this continuing resolution passed in the House is not just a vicious attack on Social Security. It is an attack on the veterans of our nation, the men and women who put their lives on the line to defend our country. While we made some progress under the Biden administration in improving veterans' health care, the truth is that the VA has remained significantly understaffed. In the fourth quarter of 2024, there were 36,000 vacancies at the VA. We needed 2,400 more doctors, 6,300 more registered nurses, 3,400 more schedulers, 1,800 more social workers, and 1,200 more custodians. So what does the Trump administration and Mr. Musk do to address this very serious workforce shortage? Their answer is that they are threatening to dismantle the VA by firing 83,000 employees. In other words, you got a shortage today, and their solution to the shortage is to fire 83,000 workers. Not only does this CR do nothing to stop that, but it cuts more than $20 billion in funding needed to provide care for veterans exposed to burn pits, Agent Orange, and other toxic substances next year. Mr. President, pathetically, our nation, the richest country on earth, has the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on the planet, and that is often reflected in the crises facing many public schools today. Throughout America, children are coming into school hungry. Kids are coming into school with serious mental issues. Kids are coming into school from dysfunctional families often dealing with drug abuse. And what is the Trump-Musk administration doing about that crisis? Well, their response was interesting. Just the other day, they fired half of the staff at the Department of Education. That means that it will be far harder to administer the Title I program that helps 26 million low-income kids get the education they need and pays the salaries of some 180,000 public school teachers throughout the country. So how does a school in a working-class community survive if you don't get the funds to pay the teachers? Further, it means that it will be far harder to administer the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the IDEA, that provides vital resources for 7.5 million kids with disabilities. We have made progress in a bipartisan way over the last number of years to say to families that if your kid has a disability, that kid can still go to a public school, there will be services available for that kid. But when you cut the Department of Education staff here in Washington in half, that is going to be extremely difficult to do. And it means that it will be far harder for some 7 million low-income and working-class students to get the Pell Grants they need to get a higher education. In fact, just hours after the Department of Education laid off half of its staff, the website for the free application for federal student aid that working families use to apply for Pell Grants and other financial institutions crashed. Fired workers, the website crashed, people who are applying for Pell Grants. This CR that we will be looking at perhaps tomorrow gives the Trump administration the green light to make these horrific cuts to education. And it's not just education. Mr. President, we have a major health care crisis in our country. Despite spending twice as much per capita on health care as the people of any other major country, 85 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured. Over 500,000 of our people go bankrupt because of medically related debt. Over 60,000 people die each year because they can't afford to get to a doctor on time. And our life expectancy is not only lower than almost any other major country, it is a system in which working class and low-income Americans die 7 years younger than wealthier Americans. So you got a crisis. People can't find a doctor. People are going bankrupt because of health care bills. And what does this CR do? Well, at a time when, in particular, our primary health care system is completely broken, when we don't have enough doctors or nurses or dentists or mental health counselors, this proposal cuts community health center funding by 3.2%, cuts the National Health Service Corps by over 5%, and cuts funding for teaching health centers, a program which helps train doctors in rural and underserved areas, by almost 13%. So in the midst of a horrific primary health care crisis in Vermont and all over rural America, this proposal will make it that much harder for people to get the health care that they desperately need. But it's not just health care. Everybody in this country, from Vermont to Los Angeles, understands we have a major housing crisis. And it's not just all of the homelessness we are seeing. Over 20 million of our people, incredibly, spend more than 50% of their limited income on housing. How in God's name do you pay for anything else? How do you buy food? How do you take care of health care if you're spending 50% or more for your housing? So, how does this CR address the housing crisis? Well, it does it by cutting rental assistance for low-income families in America by $700 million, which could lead to more than 32,000 families in our country being evicted from their homes. Well, that is a heck of a solution to the housing crisis. You make it much worse. But it's not just housing. I know that the president might disagree. He thinks that climate change is a hoax. The whole scientific community understands that it is an existential threat. They understand that the last 10 years have been the warmest ever recorded, and extreme weather disturbances and natural disasters have been taking place all over the world, from California to India, across Europe to North Carolina. So what does the CR do about the existential threat of climate change? It does not even specify funding levels within the Environmental Protection Agency. In other words, the administration could simply eliminate funding for climate change and environmental justice, and that would be consistent with this CR. And on top of all of this, the administration is already indicating that they will simply ignore the provisions of the spending bill they don't like. This week, it was reported that Vice President J.D. Vance said to the Senate Republican caucus, quote, "I want everyone to vote yes the President under Section 2 will ensure allocations from Congress are not spent on things that harm the taxpayer. There's so much grift in Washington. Let's move the CR, get to reconciliation, and for Congress to pass appropriations. End of quote. In other words, what Vance is saying is, don't worry about what's actually in the bill. The Trump administration doesn't like it. They won't do it. And let's be clear. The House CR that was passed in an extremely partisan vote, I think they won by 3 or 4 votes, one Democrat out of 215 voted for it. The House CR and the Trump administration are doing everything they can to lay the groundwork for more tax breaks for billionaires, paid for by massive cuts to Medicaid, nutrition assistance, housing, and education. So you're looking at a 1-2 punch, a very bad CR, and then a reconciliation bill coming down, which will be the final kick in the teeth for the American people. This legislation that the Republicans are working on, the reconciliation bill, would cut taxes for billionaires in the top 1% by over $1.1 trillion over the next decade. According to a recent study, if all of Trump's so-called America First policies are enacted, the bottom 95% of Americans will see their taxes go up, while the richest 5% will see their taxes go down, way down. I should also mention that that reconciliation bill, which Republicans are working on right now, would also cut Medicaid by $880 billion. Tax breaks for billionaires, throwing low-income kids off of health care, decimating nursing homes all over America because nursing homes receive 2/3 of their funding from Medicaid, making it harder for community health centers to survive, who provide health care to 32 million Americans, because 43% of their revenue comes from Medicaid. Cut Medicaid by $880 billion. You will significantly deteriorate the quality of health care all over America at a time when the system is already broken. Further, the reconciliation bill proposes to cut at least $230 billion from nutrition. Today, nearly 1 out of 5 kids in America rely on federal nutrition programs to keep them from going hungry. And I find it rather remarkable that the richest person on earth, somebody worth hundreds of billions of dollars, that he and his other oligarch friends are working night and day to cut programs for the working people of this country and to actually deny food to hungry kids in America. There is no world, no universe, no religion that would not believe that that is grossly immoral and unacceptable. You don't give tax breaks to the rich and take food away from hungry children. Mr. President, the House CR bill that we will be soon voting on here is a piece of legislation I cannot support. Instead, what the Senate must do is pass a 30-day CR so that all members of Congress, not just the House Republican leadership, can come together and produce a good piece of legislation that works for all Americans and not just the few. We have an opportunity now to serve the American people. We have an opportunity to write something that reflects what people in the Congress feel, what the people in America feel. Now, I go around the country, and just a couple of weeks ago, I held a telephone town hall in Vermont. We are a small state, Mr. President. We only have about 650,000 people. And yet on that telephone town hall, there was some 34,000 people listening in. That is a significant percentage of a small state. I have been in many parts of the country recently. I have been in Iowa. I have been in Wisconsin. I have been in Nebraska. I've been in Michigan. And what I can tell you with absolute certainty is whether people are conservative, whether they're Republican, whether they're progressives, whether they're moderate, independent, whatever they may be, there are very few people in this country who think we should give $1 trillion in tax breaks to the rich and cut back on Medicaid, education, and nutritional programs for hungry children. So, Mr. President, what I strongly propose is that we pass a 30-day CR, that we do what has always been the case here in the Senate, have both parties work together to come up with a good piece of legislation. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.